Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast at J Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions for our guest into the comment box, and you'll see me check from time to time. Today's guest is Sandra A. Gutierrez, an acclaimed food journalist, professional cooking instructor, recipe developer, and author of four cookbooks: Latin American Street Food, The Best Flavors of Markets, Beaches, and Roadside Stands from Mexico to Argentina; Beans and Field Peas, Savor the South Cookbook; the new Southern Latino Table, recipes that bring together the bold and beloved flavors of Latin America and the American South. Her recent, let's see, her recent tomb, 600 pages, 300 recipes, Latinisimo, I'll do this again, Latinisimo, home recipes from the 21 countries of Latin America is gathering accolades from the New York Times, Saveur, Chicago Times, and appearing in every top cookbook list for 2023. Just the other day, the Food Network put out theirs, Bon Appetit. She is considered a national expert on Latin American foodways and of the Southern Regional Cuisine of the United States. She has been awarded the La Dame d'Escoffier MFK Fisher Grand Prize Award for Excellence in Food Writing, and her work has been recognized as part of the permanent food exhibit at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. Let's say good afternoon to Sandra.
Hello.
Hi, Sandra. It's a privilege to finally meet you. We have a lot of friends in common, and to finally get a chance to talk to you, I'm really quite excited.
Thank you. I'm so excited too.
Yeah, I usually ask, I'm going to ask you the same question I always start off every show with. So, other than this interview today, what else is on your plate to do today?
I am packing because I'm going off to New York for an event tomorrow for Latinisimo, and I'm going to stop at Knopf, my publishers, and meet my team. We haven't met since we signed the book deal because it was COVID. So it's our big, we're having some pretty big things happening there tomorrow.
Well, they should be like this. I mean, the book is just immense, and we could spend hours upon it, but I want people to learn a little bit more about you, and then get into Latinismo and this tomb and how you started it. Tell us a little bit about your Latin background. You were born in the United States, but raised where?
I was raised in Guatemala. My parents were Guatemalans. My father was an oral surgeon, my mother an economist. And I was born in the States because my father was getting his specialization in maxillofacial surgery in Philadelphia. So I was born there. And then we moved back to Guatemala when I was 5. And I was raised there until I left when I was 18. I left to go to college. So I spent my 13 most formative years, which is where I get my accent from, going to the American school in Guatemala. So I've lived with a foot here and a foot there in both cultures, traveling to the US every year several times, but still traveling through Latin America mostly.
Well, your parents, from everything that I read, traveled quite a bit. And I liked something that I read about you and your family, because I'm very big about the family table, and people should try to have it, even if they have busy lives. There's got to be that day, at least one day a week, the family sits down in unity and shares a meal, because that's where the memories come from. Um, but you had said you were raised to taste everything,
Mm-hmm.
but if you were in someone's home, that you should eat what was served.
Yes, it was considered the ultimate gift of hospitality. And, um, I learned to eat many, many things like that. The one the scariest thing I ever had growing up, I was about 7 years old, and I still remember it, was tomato aspic. And I was like, what is that? for a 7-year-old child. I still remember the menu. It was tomato aspic, and then she served us tongue in a white sauce and mushrooms and green peas and gnocchi. And I actually loved everything. I was just afraid of the aspic.
Jiggle.
But, I liked it. I tried everything, and I ended up really enjoying it. And as was customary with me, unfortunately, and still is, asking for seconds.
Yeah, I'm in that same thing. Though as a child, I barely ate anything. Unfortunately, that changed. Um, my mother just felt so guilty because my sister and I were so tiny and we didn't gain weight and we were skinny. So she offered us, this is inflation, $10 a year if we could gain 10 pounds.
Wow. I could have given you some of mine. I was offered money from my dad to lose weight, believe it or not.
So let me see. I have a million notes here. How did you end up in North Carolina?
My husband came to Duke University for his master's degree in business. And so we came to North Carolina as newlyweds in 1985. Then we took 8 years break and we went to Toronto, Canada, where his business was. And after that, we returned to North Carolina. We had the option to go anywhere in the States that we wanted for him to start a new business. And we chose to come back to where we felt most at home. And we've been here for 30 years.
Well, and the Carolinas have some great cookbook authors, Nancy McDermott, Natalie Dupree. It's a lot of great writers down there. So you went to Smith College, if I'm correct. Was your major journalism?
It was English. I was an English major. So, creative writing mostly. I never thought I was going to write about cookbooks. I always thought I was going to write novels or that I was going to be perhaps one of those. I had seen William Holden in Life is a Many Splendored Thing, being a reporter underneath the bombs in war, because I had grown up in war-torn Guatemala. So I had all these romantic ideas of what I was going to write. But then I became a mother and the big chicken in me was born. And I don't know, food just happened to be the one thing where both my worlds came together. I did some catering. I did a lot of cooking instruction in Toronto, Canada, to people who wanted to learn more about Latin American cuisines. And it all fell into place when I came to North Carolina. My husband came home one day and said, you're driving me crazy. You need to get a job. There was nothing for me to do here in Cary, especially after being in such a lively city as Toronto. And he said, and the newspaper's looking for a food editor, and I think you can do this. Please write an article. I'll drive it back with me after lunch on my way to work. And we did that. I wrote an article on olive oil in half an hour, typed it. Remember, that was before email, before internet. He dropped it over to the newspaper, and I was hired that night to be the food editor for the Cary News. And that's when things got really interesting.
I have to go, if we look at our friends and the people that we look up to in the paths that they took, and you never know where that turn's going to take you. So this is a blessing for us because look at what we've learned about Latin American foods, and Latinisimo is about the family table.
Yes.
And the 21 Latin American countries.
Exactly.
And right, 600 pages. Now, I know you couldn't have just started with 600. Was it much larger? It was 300 recipes. How many recipes started this book?
This was a crazy endeavor. The book started with 9,000 recipes on my recipe list. So not that I had developed all 9,000 recipes, but I have them. And of course, I knew we couldn't do a book that size, but I wanted to make sure that I was inclusive to every single country. And so what made it possible for me to narrow it down to the 350 plus recipes in the book, plus about 400 variations that you'll find throughout the book, was the fact that we decided that I wanted the book to be exclusively about homemade recipes from the modern cook in Latin America today. And the fact that we could divide it by ingredient as opposed to by country allowed me to be more inclusive and showcase more of the differences while at the same time celebrating the similarities between each country. So we were able to narrow it down to the 300, I believe it's 357 recipes and about 400 variations in the book. So you still get a very large picture without becoming overwhelming. And yet all the recipes are super doable. They're not complicated to find the ingredients. You can make them every day of the week. And it doesn't require people to take a huge leap of faith and try things that they could be intimidated by.
What kicked off this book? I mean, you wrote, was it the Latin American street food, the best flavors of markets, beaches, and roadside stands from Mexico to Argentina? Was that sort of the start of it?
Well, the start of it was sooner. The first book that I proposed to my agent, who back then was Lisa Eckes, now it's her daughter, Sally Eckes, was a book on Latin American cuisine. But she told me, this was in 2007, she said, Sandra, they're not ready for that book yet. It's too big, it's too difficult. We need to introduce them to something smaller. And it was the New Southern Latino book that came first because I had already discovered that culinary movement. And so when the University of North Carolina Press read the chapter that I had written on this proposal about that movement, which, was very exciting. Once I was able to prove it was a real movement, they called me and they said, we want a whole book on this. That is the book that landed me on the Smithsonian, because I'm only one in a handful of people who have ever discovered a culinary movement in the United States. And this is a very real one where people from 21 Latin American countries descended upon the entire southern region. And I don't include Texas, California, New Mexico, the area that was once part of Mexico, because all of those countries have Mexican-centric movements. But here in North Carolina, Mississippi, the rest of the South, it is people from 21 different countries. So Argentina, Peru, Cuba, Guatemala, all the countries coming over, and all having an effect in one culinary culture, and just building a new branch of what is already a cuisine that is filled by a lot of movements, like the Creole movement and, the Cajun movement and things like that, and the Low Country movement, all these things, soul food, which is pretty much based in Southern cuisine. And I found the commonalities. So after I did that book and I realized, Latin American cuisine has all of this in common with Southern regional cuisine. It's the only territory in the entire world where the same three cultures, the same culinary techniques, and the exact same culinary ingredients in the basket of ingredients that we use melded together at the same time and form cuisines that are, although diverse, they have so many things in common. So at that point, I started really paying attention to Latin American cuisines to try to find all of those commonalities rather than concentrate in the differences, which is what I had been looking at before. And that is where this book was born, the idea of this book where I was able to be more inclusive.
Right. I've listened to a couple other podcasts because you have been on a whirlwind book tour. You're here, you're there, in New York Times, you're in Bon Appetit, you're in the Food Network's list, you're doing this talk, you were just with Michael Twitty up here in DC, and probably talking, what else, but the Latin diaspora and what's going on with that, and how the influences coming into Latin America, the immigrants, the second waves of that from sort of like the Middle East, that comes into it. The African slaves come into it and what they brought. And then what we got from Latin America, which was, and North America's tomato, corn, unbelievable, and what that plays a part in. And I could probably just throw out potatoes. What am I missing?
Squash.
Grains. Pardon me?
Squash, cacao.
Oh, yeah, the cacao, the chocolate.
Potatoes.
Potato, absolutely. And the book is broken down into that. And there's a beautiful story that goes with each one of these. You really give us some history and background on that particular product, go into the recipes, which are marked by the countries of origin, and also easy or intermediate to prepare. And it's just overwhelming. Now, for a publisher to produce a book that's 300 pages, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But let me say that you also have it published in Spanish, so you have 2 books.
Yes. And it's the first time that this has ever been done, at least by Knopf or Random House, where 2 books come out simultaneously, the same book in 2 languages on exactly the same day. So it's like I had twin books. And that was very important to me because a 600-page book to translate is not easy. So I was very, very involved in the translation of the book because it needed to have my voice. Translating from one language to the other is one thing, but translating the writer's voice and the cadence of words and the meaning of ideas and metaphors is another. And Spanish is very romantic in the way that it's written. So trying to find a way in which both books could be written simultaneously was a beautiful challenge for me. That was very important because, again, a book like this one doesn't exist in Latin America either. It's a book in which the teacher in me is showcased, where I try to be like the voice that's standing next to you in the kitchen telling you, this is how you do it. This is what you need. These are the ingredients. This is where you find them. This is how you measure them. In Latin American cookbooks, even modern day cookbooks today, most recipes come in paragraph form without an ingredient list separate. And still some recipes will say, cook the chicken until you think it's done, which wouldn't fly here in the US. So I tried to actually make a book that once translated into Spanish can be picked up by any cook, and they can succeed in the recipe without having any of the previous knowledge that was assumed that readers had before cookbooks became so carefully edited here in the United States and in Europe. As a teacher, I cannot assume that my students know anything about the techniques. And so when my recipes were tested, not only by the professional tester that I hired, Liz Tarpey, who's amazing, but also by my friends and my recipe testers who were professionals, one of the sections was questions, just questions and comments. And one of the questions I remember clearly was, how come I have to pat dry the chicken before I saute it? I did it, but why? And that is a great question to answer for a beginner cook and say, well, you have to pat it dry because if you try to saute that, you're going to splatter yourself with oil and the chicken's going to steam and not caramelize. So all that information I was able to put back into the book in a way that's not intimidating, in a way that is helpful and yet not insulting to my great cooks who are also, the pros in the kitchen who know what to do and who could actually reinterpret each recipe with all the variations I give in a nanosecond.
Well, the book is not only a cookbook, it's a reference book. It's food history.
Mm-hmm.
And people would be surprised what they learn and go, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know till today. I was going to say, give me a V8, but Sarah Moulton, I said, well, that's from another generation. People won't understand that one. You had said, as a writer and a journalist and author, that it's important to know who your readers are.
Mm-hmm. It's very, very important for us to know and understand who our public is. Who are we writing this book for? And the fact that I've been able to teach now for over 30 years has allowed me to know who my readers are. I've actually met them. I've taught them. I know that their interest is in cooking food that can be easily put together without having to go to weird places to find ingredients, that they can do it while the kids are doing their homework, or perhaps they're coming after work and they're tired. And again, food that has flavor, because they're no longer afraid of flavor. They're used to going to a food truck out of the workplace and trying something with chipotles or something with you name it, another ingredient like kimchi or something like that, that they are now part of their lingo is now flavor. And so I know who they are. I also know that they're lawyers and they're doctors and they're teachers and they're immigrant workers and they're students, and so they come from all different lines of professional work. And that helps me when I know who my writer is. It helps me. I also have those people who love to just read cookbooks that may never open the book to cook from it, but they love to learn and they love to read the stories and they love culture. And so I'm able to meld both things, my love of cooking with my love of history, and of course my ability to teach, and put it all together in a way that I embrace them all and bring them all to my table, if you will.
The opening paragraph of your book, and everybody in the podcast have focused in on that, and I will do the same, that our focus in the United States when we think Latin food is Mexican, and you said that is the doorway to 20 other kitchens.
Yes, I think Latin American foodways is like a big house. And the first door that we open usually is Mexico. It's also the first country that is south of the United States. So it's normal. Anyway you see it, it is the front door to Latin America. And it's an extraordinary cuisine. But we have sort of stopped there in our love of Latin America and said, oh my gosh, Mexican cuisine is so amazing. This is all there is. And there isn't really. Once you walk into that house, you have 20 other doors. You open them, each one is a kitchen with just as exciting a cuisine and history as Mexican cuisine. And I think even though they're smaller, the countries are smaller, we have less people, they're all so worth investigating and so exciting to try. And they're so different. And yes, we do have commonalities, but they're so different from each other that, for instance, people think all of our food is spicy, and yet you go into the Cuban kitchen and there's no heat in the food. They have spices that are sweet and that add color and other types of flavor, a lot of cumin, but no chiles in their food. While if you go to Peru, on the other hand, you have a lot of spices in the food, a lot of heat, but they're completely different chiles that the ones that are used in Mexico. There are some that are fruitier, like the ají amarillo, some that are pungienter, like the rocoto, which looks like a big red apple with black seeds inside that you've never seen in Mexico. And then, of course, you find all of the world cultures that melded together in each country to form even still another layer of flavors in each place. So in Peru, you have the Asian cuisines, but also you have African cuisine, Middle Eastern forces, and of course, the incredible culinary tradition of the Incas that you don't have in Mexico. But in Mexico, you also find the Chino-Latino movement in certain parts of Mexico, where you will find Chinese accents in their food. You will find green beans that are cooked in a kung pao style, or you will find Lebanese influences in their tacos al pastor, for instance, which were at the beginning made with pita bread, not with tortillas. So all of these things, there are reverberations of all of the similarities in each country, and yet each of the compositions of cultures are so different that they translate into completely different dishes. And yet, if you are somebody who likes to eat Italian food, you will find dishes in Latin America that remind you of Italian food, the yuca gnocchi or cassava gnocchi from Brazil, for instance, or the pasta with avocado pesto from Chile. Or you'll find, the pasta secas or the sopa secas from Mexico, which are soups that are dry. Really, they're just like noodle soups that are dry. There's no sauce in it other than, it's like eating spaghetti, but we call them soups. And so on and so forth. If you like Chinese food, you'll find stir fries in Peru. If you like African food, you're going to find incredible iterations of African cuisine in Panama and in Belize, and the Garifuna influence in Honduras and in the northern eastern part of Guatemala. So there are all these things that come together. So world flavors are really present. I call Latin America the true melting pot. It is really the place where flavors are still meeting, they're still fusing, they're still fluxing, and it's never going to stop because people are still coming and going to Latin America. And yet each cuisine is separate.
I have a question here for you. It says, does your family appreciate how fortunate they are today?
You froze on me. So
Okay,
there, you're back.
okay.
So does my family appreciate what? I'm sorry.
Okay. Does your family appreciate how fortunate they are to have you to cook for them?
Oh, yes, they do. They're all grateful eaters, is what I say in my family. We've always had that tradition of sitting together at the table. I think my kids, when they were little, would say that they had to suffer through recipe testing of ingredients they hated. You know, I remember my daughter coming downstairs when she was about 9 years old saying, Mama, I've tried artichokes every which way in every dips and everything that you've done this week. I really don't like them. So I promised to make a pancake recipe test for the following week for her. But today she eats everything. She eats artichokes too, and she loves it. So yes, they're all grateful eaters. And I'm very grateful to them for allowing me this crazy career that I've taken on.
Right. And another one said, I always love tomato aspic. What's your favorite ingredient or dish today?
Oh, that's like asking me who my favorite child is. I think, what did I have for breakfast would be, I like everything and I taste everything. My favorite dishes, invariably, like most people's, will be those that bring back special memories of people who are no longer with me. So comfort foods like my grandmother's chicken and rice soup, you know, special dishes like that. My mother's chicken with orange sauce, things that just bring somebody back with me that can't be with me at this moment. And I'm sure
Yeah,
that's for everybody the same way.
yeah, food can do that. Food, that's a little trick that most people don't think about that. Food, when I'm making the chicken soup, obviously I'm thinking of my mother.
Yes.
That even though they're gone, they float back into you via food and what's at the table.
Food is
Um,
one of the most intimate things we can give each other, and that is the power of food, the memories that can come back flooding for a second, and the presence that we can get through flavor that no other creative art has. Yes, we can see what a landscape looked at a particular moment in an artist's palette, but for us, actually going back and forth through time and space and through
right.
food is something that nothing else can give us.
I'm just checking my notes. There's a million questions here, and I don't want to. Um, there was something I had where is it? I just had my finger next to it. It was something that you said. Oh, you mentioned National Geographic syndrome.
Yes.
Can you
To,
explain that?
yes, to me, the National Geographic syndrome is the first thought of people when they think of Latin American cuisine being exotic, being from far away, being maybe it weird, weird flavors, weird ingredients. I think the National Geographic syndrome is the recipe that people imagine of iguana being roasted over the fire in the middle of the jungle, which is done. It does exist, but it's very esoteric and extremely rare. And I've never done it. I've never tasted it. And I'm certainly not interested in tasting it. But I think that National Geographic painted this picture of Latin American countries as being exotic, wild, native. And they forgot that the world has also advanced and that there are a lot of, and not only power, but value in our cultures, in our history, that our civilizations, the ancient civilizations that they claim to represent, but don't do a good job representing, have given us tremendous things to the world today, like the number 0, the 365-day calendar, the ability to make chocolate, the potato, the way that corn has been feeding the world for centuries. Somebody had to discover how to pollinate corn between the male and the female flower and make corn out of it, and then to make it edible so that our bodies could absorb the niacin in it. And those were people from ancient civilizations. But then they forget that through migration that happened in the United States at the same time, we got the same number, larger numbers of migrants, but the same groups of migrants arriving to the US were arriving to Latin America. at exactly the same time. So we were seeing all of these culinary advances and amalgamations that were happening here, happening there. For instance, if you go to Italy, or if you went to Italy in the 1960s, you wouldn't find spaghetti and meatballs like the one that you would find in New York City in your, red and white tablecloth with a candle and the wax melting on the table. That didn't exist in Italy. But at the same token, that didn't exist in Latin America, and yet Italians were putting their mark there and creating special dishes. And tomatoes, of course, came from the Latin American territory. So to me, I think the National Geographic idea of Latin America or any other country, the otherness, is weird, and we are the only normal area, is what has prevented people from discovering these cuisines. And it is my hope that by making it so accessible, more people will feel invited to walk into each one of these kitchens and put their spoons in each one of the pots there and just try, taste.
Taste. Beth Corman Lee, who's a cookbook author, says,
Yes, hi Beth.
I can't wait to dive into the book. I have some specific dishes I'm looking forward to learning about. But if I didn't, what's a good way to explore the book, or where should I start?
I say this in the book. I think the basics chapter, it's a long chapter, but it's a great place to start because it gives you the flavor basis of each country, so that even if you were just to make a pot of rice and start that pot of rice with an aromatic base from Cuba, and then start a second pot of rice with an aromatic base from Colombia, it would be the same rice, the same ingredient, but the flavors would be completely different. And that gives you an idea of what the soul of each country tastes like. So I would say start from the very beginning, from the basic chapter.
Before we get to my final questions, I want to remind people that the book is Latinisimo. Yes, I've been practicing.
I know, it sounds great.
We're getting there. We're getting there. The links are in the comment section, but Sandra A. Gutierrez,
Perfect. I'll adopt you.
Latinisimo, and your socials, everything are up in the comment section, and they can click through there. And you can find it on Amazon.com. It's everywhere. It is one of the premier books of the year, and you need to have it on your shelf. It is more than just recipes. There's a lot of information's a lot of, oh, I didn't know that, and you'll just, I like to read the headers. I am one of those people that a cookbook is like a novel to me. In fact, I'm just going to, I wrote a story. This just came out in J. Moore. And let's see, I have to put the readers on now. Hang on.
I never take mine off. I can't see.
It's in there. It says True Confessions of a Cookbook Junkie. If the Betty Ford Center ever offered treatment for cookbook addictions, I'd be the first one in line. At one point in my life, I owned close to 500 cookbooks, old, new, regional, international, individually themed, mushrooms, risottos, apples, chef or restaurant driven. Why so many? Well, some people love novels and biographies. I happen to love stories behind the recipes. I read a cookbook like a novel, telling the story about a protagonist, their family, and their life. And my final line in the book says, sorry, but online recipes have no soul. Cookbooks do.
Oh,
So
yes, I write the head notes for you, for readers like you.
right.
Because I love to read cookbooks like novels too.
Right.
There's so much that you can add to a cookbook that make it interesting and fun. And for me, it's that element of fun that goes along with learning that cannot be lost when you're learning new cuisines, especially 21 of them. It needs to be fun, it needs to be easy, it needs to be approachable, and it needs to be interesting.
It is. It is a reference book. It's a cookbook. It's a history book. So Latinisimo. Get it. So my last questions that I always ask: what was your best bite all week?
My best bite of week, all week, was a slice of my sourdough bread that I make every week with really delicious European butter. I needed a piece of bread.
Well, you know what, bread and butter was the sustenance during the Depression. My parents grew up then, and my father, the best meal you could give him was rye bread and butter and soup bones.
Yum.
This is what he grew up on.
Simple food. They say men cannot live only from bread and water, but I'm close. I'm up there. Maybe some tortillas or arepas in the way.
Right. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Everything that you're going to do in your life has a reason. You might not understand why things are happening to you or why you're having to do little jobs here and there, but it'll all make sense at the end of your life when you put all of your experiences together, and you'll see that it's been a map to where you end up.
Hmm. Good. Okay. If you can wake up tomorrow morning with a new talent, what would the new talent be?
Oh my goodness. I think I would love to be able to paint. I would love to paint. I have so many friends who are artists and I see them relax. Either that or sewing. I can't sew for a life of me. Those would be the two talents I'd love to have.
Well, I'm with you with the painting. Sewing, not so much for me. I can get a button on. That's as good as I get. I remember home ec, and we had to put in zippers, and everybody had problems zippers into the skirts. But that's another story. And finally, what didn't I ask you that I probably should have?
Um, my goodness, that is always the hardest question. What I'm going to have for dinner tonight, I have no idea. And now just how people can follow me. I would love people to join me on social media, on Instagram. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos starting in the new year once I get time after the book tour. And that is mostly what I would like people to do. Just follow me and ask me what else you want to read, what else you want to learn, because I'm going to continue to write about it. And I'm interested in what my readers want, not necessarily what I want.
Good answer. Good answer. Sandra, I want to thank you. It was a pleasure to finally get to meet you, even though via video or live Facebook, but to finally chat with you. I looked at Facebook. We have 538 friends in common. So
And
it
I
was a,
thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a fun show. I keep my eye on it also. And I've been wanting to meet you too. And I know we have a lot of people in common. So we're going to have to make it an in-person meeting soon.
well, when you come up this way, just let me know.
Thank you. Thanks for having
All,
me.
all the best of the holiday season. Stay safe. No more car accidents.
No, please.
Please, please. All right, everyone. Thank you, Sandra, so much. Great, great interview.
Thank you, Dara. You have happy holidays too.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. Happy Hanukkah, which starts next Thursday. So, the Food Enthusiast will not be on next Thursday. I'll be returning in 2 weeks when my guest will be Chef Zuri Coles, Executive Corporate Chef for Miss Shirley's Cafe, the nationally acclaimed breakfast, lunch, and brunch spots in Baltimore, Annapolis, and even at BWI Airport. Cole oversees Miss Shirley's special events, from private events to sponsorships and pop-up events. She's led community outreach initiatives, including preparing meals for the first responders and vulnerable populations in Baltimore City during COVID-19. The food tidbit of the week is I'm going to show you again. Let's see where the book is. Jay Moore. If you're in Baltimore, it's on the stand. It's the food issues. And you can read my story, which is at the back of the book, True Confessions of a Cookbook Junkie, and also my chocolate marshmallow and cake, which is chocolate cake with marshmallow icing. Both have mint in it. And let's see what else. Oh, J Moore Living gives away gift certificates to local restaurants. They're $50 gift certificates. In order to have a chance, go to jmoreliving.com/contest and enter to win. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at food@jmoreliving.com or Instagram at Dara Cooks. All shows are immediately archived in video form on JMOR's Facebook page and jmoreliving.com. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate when you share our show with friends and family. May your plates always, always remain full. I will see you in 2 weeks. Happy Hanukkah to those who celebrate. Thank you for tuning in.